Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by the Canadian Professional Sales Association, our accredited partner, Leitch of Teneo Results, and our special guest, Asad Zaman, Chief Executive Officer, North America at Sales Talent Agency. Today's webinar is called Inside, Outside, Upside Down, the impact of the new economy on selling and what to do about it. You'll learn about different go-to-market approaches, revenue creation models and roles, and sales enablement practices designed to meet the ever-changing customer and new hybrid selling buying process, how sales calls are being reimagined to better meet the needs of shifting customer buying preferences, how the rapid adoption of online buying and selling can be leveraged for accelerating growth versus reducing or even eliminating the role of the sales professional, and identifying the most effective and efficient model for your organization, your customers, and your performance-driven sales team. Please note that all of today's attendees have been placed on mute for the duration of the workshop, and that you may ask questions throughout using the questions function of your GoToWebinar dashboard. Now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Lisa and Asad to start and introduce themselves. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rupalin. Great pleasure to be back here with CPSA and with my good friend, Asad. Welcome, Asad.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, well, this pandemic has certainly turned things inside, outside, upside down. And that's exactly what's happened with sales roles and salespeople, inside salespeople, outside salespeople. And during the past 16 months, upside down. So Asad and I are really looking forward to having a great interactive conversation today so that we can talk about what this all means, because we're certainly not going back to normal. So we all know nothing happens until a sale is made, yet one of the most effective strategies to stimulate the economy and growth is through the sales teams. So we want to be able to take a look at how sales teams can be instrumental in growing business. It has been fascinating during the past 16 months to be able to see what industries, organizations began in survive and then turned into thrive mode. But what is going to be more fascinating is how we continue to crawl out of this. And with more than 50% of vaccination rates happening, we are crawling out of this, yet it's not going back to normal. So let's take a look at Asad, and let's just take a look at how this pandemic has changed both buying and selling roles and what the impact on the sales team is. So Rupalin, we've got a poll to begin things with. Do you want to play that? Launch the poll?
Just about to launch the poll. The question here is, what percentage of people think in-person sales meetings will be the norm again by the start of 2022? So I'm just going to go ahead and launch. The options here are 75%, 50%, 25%, 15%, and less than 10%. So go ahead and take your pick. Got about three-quarters of the...
Yep, okay, very good, excellent.
Okay. Just gonna give it an extra 5 seconds. So we have about three-quarters of the group voted.
And then we'll be sharing these stats because these are recently distributed stats from McKinsey. So Asad, while we're waiting for those stats to be able to come in, what is the impact on the sales team? What have you seen as the single biggest factor that the pandemic has changed both buying and selling roles?
I think if you look back to what happened because of the pandemic initially, it created an economic shutdown. And there was an economic shutdown caused by a healthcare crisis, and pretty across the board, companies were impacted in a very similar way. Now, what you started seeing is different companies gain traction at a different pace, right? There were sectors in software. Within software, there were certain verticals that recovered really, really quickly, and other sectors that took a little bit longer to recover. What was very clear and across the board for everyone was that remote work had become the norm. There was a lockdown. whether your business had started recovering or not, how you did your job in most cases, especially for sales, was remotely. And that required a lot of adjustments for us, but also for our buyers. A lot of the buyers out there were not used to buying virtually. And so it required both parties to learn some new habits and try and master how to do their jobs effectively. And I think that's been the real biggest impact of this is remote work, which has caused virtual sales and virtual buying. We've gone through enough of an experience, enough time has passed where you can talk to the buyers and understand what they feel about this. And I think that's really important, because when we do sales, we need to do it in a buyer-centric way. And right now, there was a study done by Bain where they surveyed buyers in a number of different industries. 96% of them said that they prefer buying virtually. There was another article released in where LinkedIn State of Sales Survey, actually, in which three out of five buyers said that they don't plan on going back to virtual events, in-person events, trade shows, and conferences in the near future. And so I think the single biggest impact of all of this is buyers are saying, we actually are quite all right with buying virtually, which then means it's on us to master virtual sales, which I believe is here to stay in some way, form, or the other.
Yes. So, Rupalin, do we have the poll results? What percentage of people think in-person sales meetings will be the norm again by the start of 2022?
So 18% have voted 75% will be in the norm by the start of 2022. 39% said 50%, 37%, 25%, and at 3%, everyone voted less than 10% and 15% being our lowest.
Okay, well, we will share in a few minutes what those results are according to McKinsey, but it's interesting because if we look at this, basically almost 60% say that it'll be 50% of face-to-face meetings. So let's just see what others are saying about this. So when we take a look at this, first of all, I think we need to take a look at prior to the pandemic, what did roles look like? And if we looked at this, there was inside sales, there was outside sales, people managing a geographic territory, there were lead generation, BDM roles, technical sales, enterprise sales, account managers, all sorts of different sales who in the end are responsible for generating revenue for their organizations. And so when we look at outside sales, it basically, the focus was to be able to manage their customers, their territory by traveling to meet face to face. So that's what was happening. And many of them spent their time as road warriors on the road. But now they were limited by the pandemic. So then they had to take a look at what they could do in order to be able to change those face-to-face meetings. Some of them got very accustomed to do it on the virtual platforms, telephone, emails. So there was a lot of things that were starting to be able to change this. But the other thing that really started to change is those outside salespeople started to feel like they were becoming inside salespeople, or what was the difference? And so Asad, you and I talked a lot about, you know, there's so many different definitions of inside sales. Like when I'm speaking to a VP of sales and they say, you know, I've got this many outside sales, inside sales, account managers, support staff, there's such a perception of inside sales. Why do you think there is? Why do you think there's so many different definitions and roles and responsibilities of inside sales?
I think pretty across the board, inside sales was looked as like an earlier stage role, right? Like you started on the inside because you needed to be observed and micromanaged, and the job was a little bit more transactional. And then as you gained some experience and proved yourself, then we would let you go outside the office. You were autonomous, you were on the road, you were meeting people in person. That was a role where you were able to make more money, and seemed like the next step from inside sales, right? And it's kind of strange that we named roles according to how the function worked. Like instead of taking a client-centric approach to the role and naming it, and kind of thinking, okay, when a client sees this, if a person's reaching out to them saying, I'm an outside sales rep, does that tell the client anything? Does it help us in any real way? No, really, it doesn't, right? I don't care if the person's inside sales, outside sales. Are they going to solve my problem? Are they the right person for me to talk to? Does the role help me understand what this person's job is in this process? Like, those are the things I would have hoped to see, but we named it the other way. So that's how inside sales was perceived. It was perceived as the stepping stone. And it was really looked down upon, right? Like, no one wanted to be an inside sales professional 10, 15 years down the line. Well, now everyone's an inside sales professional, right? Like, because of the pandemic, things are opening up again, but we're still not back to in-person meetings in the same velocity as before. So essentially, everyone is doing their job sitting inside. And so now it's created this weird dynamic for the outside sales reps who think that they've taken a step back. And that's something that companies have to solve for, because to those people, their real job is to be outside and to be client facing. I think, personal opinion is that virtual sales is here to stay, because remote buying is here to stay. Clients want to buy remotely in a lot of cases. If 96% of them are polling that we like it, then it's crazy for us to try and force them to do it in a different way, which means we've got to change how we think about selling, that selling from the inside is looked down upon and selling from the outside is looked at as the more respectable way. LinkedIn released some data in that state of sales survey again, where I believe almost half the respondents had sold a $500,000 deal completely virtually without ever meeting a person. Remember, there used to be this point of view that it can only work on the more transactional side. And the minute things get a little bit more complicated, the client gets bigger, the deal gets bigger, the sales cycle gets longer, you must meet in person. Not necessarily anymore. And so now we've got to go away from what this inside-outside sales model is and really think about it in a different way.
Absolutely. And so there's some interesting stats. So let's take a look at these stats, because McKinsey has just released what we're going to be calling inside, outside. Some people may call it upside down, but it's the new hybrid role. And you're right. I think we need to be able to find a really cool title to that. And they talk a lot about the omni-channel. And omni-channel is really defined, there we go, as a way for sales multi-channels to be able to look at providing a seamless customer experience, whether the customer is shopping online or brick and mortar. Salespeople are going to have to be even more flexible, functional, and certainly be able to embrace the virtual. So let's take a look at some of these stats, because there's some really interesting stats here that helps us to be able to understand the new B2B sales rep of the future. So here's where they say 85% of B2B organizations expect hybrid reps who interact with customers remotely to be the most common sales role over the next 3 years. Fascinating. So it's going to be a combination. 64% of B2Bs tend to increase the number of hybrid sellers over the next 6 months, making this model the lead sales role. And certainly at Sales Talent Agency, I know that you are seeing such an increase and a rise of people wanting to hire salespeople, but they're going to be looking for these types of sales skills.
Yeah, agreed.
Now, so here's the stat. We asked this in our poll, and our participants today said almost 60% said it was going to be face-to-face meetings. McKinsey and Company have just released 15% of B2Bs expect in-person sales meetings to be the norm by the start of 2022. Only 15%. They've been able to operate effectively, efficiently, to be able to reduce the sales cycle for the past 16 months. It's not going to increase significantly as people are predicting today. So this will be interesting to see. 41% of leaders say e-commerce is their most effective sales route, compared to 37% in person and 31% video. So Asad, I think that's another key thing here is salespeople are really going to have to be able to show their value, their expertise. Otherwise, it's way too easy to be able to just shop online, whether it be B2B or B2C. A few more stats here. Now, some of you may be saying, no, my customers want to meet with me, and we're hearing that. But the reality is 8 in 10 B2B decision makers say that the omni-channel is as or more effective. And buyers have limited time. So by the time they actually, meet somebody at their lobby, bring them in, offer a coffee, all of those kinds of things that do build rapport, it takes time. Certainly, virtual selling and buying has become much, much more effective. So when we take a look at this, a few more interesting stats here. 83% of B2B leaders say omnichannel is more successful. So again, leaders are realizing it's more effective and certainly cost effective to even win new business. 2 to 3 B2B buyers prefer the remote human connection. So last year, that was one of the biggest strategies or obstacles that we saw, is salespeople were feeling humanly disconnected. But Asad, what's really interesting is buyers aren't feeling that way.
No.
So they're able to actually get that satisfaction from remote human interactions or digital self-service. So digital selling certainly is key.
I think we should break that down a bit. So habits, they take time to build and time to break. A lot of sellers are experienced. They've been in the space for quite some time, especially outside sales reps, right? They are later on in their careers. They've gone past that stepping stone of inside sales that we look down upon. And so then they've had many years of being outside sales professionals where they've been successful. So that success can be quantified in terms of their earnings, in terms of what those earnings have allowed them to do for their own lives, buy their houses, buy the things that they want, do the things that they were striving to do. So those habits have been reinforced by the positive outcomes that they have gained through those habits. That's the hardest habit to break, is one that helped you build wealth. If you've made $1 million across your career because of being an outside sales rep, that habit is really entrenched, and it's going to be that much harder to break that habit and do it in a different way. You're always going to tilt towards that's the better way to do it. It's going to take time to break that habit. Now, this is where managers and leaders need to understand the real fundamental benefits of virtual sales, or at least a hybrid model where a lot of the work is being done virtually. If you play this out a little bit and say we've mastered it, because I don't think anyone has mastered it. I don't even think the most progressive software companies have mastered virtual selling. So we're not there yet, but we've got enough traction to see this can work really well. If it works out, what happens? Sales cycles reduce, right? Because in the past, let's say you're selling one of these big $500,000 deals. You have multiple decision makers. You have to set up meetings where everybody can get together, and you're wrestling with people's calendars. In some cases, you're traveling and wrestling with people being in the same place at the same time. Elongates the sales cycle. You can increase productivity per person, because if they are on the road or traveling, let's say they can manage 10 deals at any given point, right? Well,
Yes.
Now if they're doing a lot of this interaction virtually, can they manage 15 or 20, right? Their close ratios could also improve, because they can now start using interesting technology and data to be able to have compelling outcomes that they're able to manufacture for themselves, because right now there's an opportunity to stand out by being great at virtual sales, because so many people suck at it, right? So the ones that are really good at it, you're going to buy from them. So if we master it, our close ratios go up. So literally productivity per person goes up. The cost of sales goes down, because you're not spending on traveling and on gas and on cars and all these things. It's great for companies. It's great for salespeople, because they can get paid better. And we know that of all the things salespeople care about, the number one thing they care about is compensation. The data proves this. I'll debate anyone on this point. I'm not saying that they don't care about management and training and transparency. They do, but they care about compensation more than anything else. So it's better for the company because it's more profitable and people can be more productive. By default, it's better for people because they can make more money. As leaders, we need to be super excited about that and see that if we play this out the right way, this is so beneficial. And that'll give us the confidence to start investing in the training and the enablement and all these things to help us master this.
Absolutely. And what's nice, it will actually open up the available talent pool, because people do not have to just be available to travel. You can certainly attract more people. There was a great article in the Wall Street Journal that Sandra, the CEO of CPSA, shared with me yesterday, that there is certainly a challenge in being able to find the right sales talent, but it's about communicating, marketing to the business grads to let them that sales is not what it used to be, and it certainly is not going back the way it used to be. And this is a glorious opportunity for us to be able to communicate and create awareness that young and new business grads can be attracted and have a very, very viable, a healthy career in sales.
I think that's such an important point. So we know that there's a gender diversity problem in sales, right? Every company wants a more equitable distribution of genders and backgrounds in their sales team, not just because it seems like the right thing to do because of, because of what we read and hear out there. It's also got some fundamental benefits to businesses. Diversity of thought leads to better ideas. More diverse workforce means your workforce at scale can connect with more types of buyers, right? So there's some real benefits to it. But I would imagine, so if we take a role that used to have a 70% travel component, and let's say that travel component had to do not just with driving around your city, but traveling outside, like going away for a couple of days at a time. There are certain people who just wouldn't pick that. Like if you're going to be a mother, are you going to want to travel 70% of the time? Who's going to take care of the kid? So you wouldn't pick the career path. You'd say, okay, it sounds quite intellectually stimulating to be a sales professional, solving problems in a consultative manner. It seems lucrative, but the opportunity cost is still not in my favor because I'm going to be away from my family for so long. I know I wouldn't want to travel that much. I don't have a family, and I still wouldn't want to travel that much. Like I'm an introverted guy. I'm a hermit. Like I like having my rituals and my systems. Like traveling really throws everything out of whack for me. So I do think that this allows us to build the type of sales teams that can allow us to service our clients in a better way. This is a real unique opportunity for sales to become more inclusive.
Absolutely. Yeah. So then, Asad, let's take a look at this, because based on these stats, right, the skills of a salesperson are going to evolve. But part of that also is looking at not just skills, but also taking a look at the will. So what do you believe are the will and skill required to be successful in this new type of sales role?
I think will to me is drive, right? And drive, when I break it down, is work ethic and resiliency. I think it's a fundamental. It's a thing that somebody has to bring to the table, because I don't have the time, energy, or resources to activate drive in people. People have this misconception that compensation drives people. It does not do that. Variable compensation can direct a person's drive. An example is if you make 4% commission on new business and 1% on account management, you're going to direct your energy towards new business. That's where you can make more money, right? So it can do that, but it absolutely cannot drive a person who doesn't have drive. And drive is not ambition. So for me, will is a lot about that. It's a non-negotiable. It's the thing that salespeople needed in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 60s, 70s, 80s today, right? But the skills,
that's not going to change. Yeah,
that doesn't change, right? Like that's the standard. It's almost like the first thing on the scorecard, because it's the thing that they need to bring to the table. If the person doesn't have will and they have everything else, they'll still crash and burn, right? So that's a horrible hire to make. So now we know that will is there, and will has always been there, and you need it now more than ever before, especially because in the older sales crew, so new people, let's put them to the side. The people that are the outside sales reps that have to reskill themselves right now, the resiliency they'll need to break old habits and learn new things and stumble and bumble in calls that they used to in person manage in such an elite manner, that'll require some resiliency. But hopefully if they're a few years into their career, that means they already had the will. Now skills, completely, you've got to develop some real new skills. You've got to learn how to effectively use the technologies available to you to engage your buyers. So that's not just being able to manage a Zoom call, which I still think a lot of people manage horribly. Like I went onto a sales call for 2 companies recently. They didn't put their cameras on. Like it was so weird. Like it was odd. There was another time I was buying something, and the person's setup was just really like, it was bad, right? The lighting was horrible. The camera, you could only see a part of their face. I'm not feeling comfortable and confident in this person because they haven't mastered a fundamental piece of technology that they need to use. If they don't have the acumen to have mastered this in 16 months, what are they going to solve my problems for? So I think the first is really understanding how to master the fundamental technologies. The next becomes, well, there's other stuff you can use to really stand out. Now, the good thing about industries is that some industries are more progressive in certain areas and you can learn from them. So software and technology companies by default are a little bit more edgy and progressive, right? They're using video in such an interesting way, not just in a video call, but through the entire sales process. So one way is the lead generators send videos to the prospects. I can tell you, every time I get a video email from somebody trying to sell me something, I always respond to it. It doesn't mean I buy from it, doesn't even mean I give them a meeting, but I always take the time to respond to it. And I know they made it for me because they have a little whiteboard and they write my name for it. So if this person spent the time to make a video for me, maybe even had to shoot it twice or thrice to send it over, I'm gonna give this person the respect required in that moment, which is me responding to them. Then there are other people that are using it through the sales process. So an example is they've spoken to one key decision maker. They know there are other people that are influencers in the sales process that might have certain questions and concerns. Their decision maker or their advocate has told them this. So they shoot short videos, send it to the advocate and say, this is for Bob, addressing the one point that you said that Bob is going to be concerned about. And so this is called asynchronous selling. And it works really, really well. It has shown to reduce the sales cycles fundamentally. So in terms of the new skills, I think it's mastering the tools out there, and no one has mastered it. 56% of managers struggle at managing a remote team. A similar amount of buyers feel that they're struggling selling remotely. Part of it is working remotely and the struggles of that. But part of it is no one feels like they've fully mastered the new channels available to them to engage with their buyers. But we've seen enough positive outcomes of doing it right now that we need to lean into it versus say, thank God the world is open. Now let's go back and be all road warriors and always meet people and always do this and always do that.
Yep, yep. So let's get some feedback from the audience in the chat box. Let's just ask our participants today, what are the skills that your team have been embracing during this past 16 months? So what do you feel are either the will or the skill that your team has been adopting, embracing, and mastering? So let's see that in the chat box so we can get some feedback. And we'll actually share with what we think are the will and skill to be able to do that. And
one other thing to add, by the way.
Yeah.
I think it's also learning how to use our CRMs for our own benefits. And this is on managers. I think managers have not at scale shown sales professionals why it's in their favor to have a clean CRM. It feels like a tool through which we can have oversight on our people. And by default, that means people are going to not prioritize that system. So it's not a center of truth. If we play it out in our minds and say that our CRM is a center of truth, it has amazing information in it, everybody's keeping it clean, what it allows for is insights, right? Because then you can analyze all of this data and get some interesting insights, which allow us to be more tactical and strategic with the way we deploy our resource as sales professionals, which is our time. The job of a CEO is effective allocation of resources across the business. The job of a sales professional is to be the CEO of their territory, the owner of a business within a business, allocating your key resources, your time in the most efficient way possible. So let's say you can you can understand from your CRM that a certain market, a certain vertical, or a certain type of company is responding really well to a certain type of message. You're going to double down on that. But you can only do that if you truly have good data to base these moves off of. And it's on managers and leaders to show their people how this can help them versus use it as a way to say, hey, Bob, you didn't update the system properly. You need to update the system. We need a clean system. That's the message that annoys a sales professional. Show them how it's helping them, not how it's being used to manage them.
Yes, great. And I saw a lot of people and a lot of teams at the beginning of the pandemic use this time to really help their team adopt the CRMs, because many of them have implemented it, but it's the adoption that's key. So I understand the chat box, people are not able to leave notes in the chat box, but if you do have questions, please start posting them through in the questions box, and we will have time to be able to answer those questions towards the end of the webinar, or even throughout if there's any questions that are relevant. So Rupalin, if you could monitor that questions box, then we'll make sure that we've got time to answer the questions during the latter part of today's webinar. So let's take a look at the will and skill. As a salesperson myself, as a VP of sales, and now the opportunity to be able to train, coach, and work with sales teams for almost 20 years, it is absolutely fascinating how this has evolved. When it comes to will, certainly one of the key competencies is commitment. It's not commitment to skills, but commitment is defined as the willingness to go out of your own comfort zone to do whatever it takes to be greater in sales success. And certainly that's what this pandemic has forced us to be able to do for some. So again, we're going to encourage you, this is game on. What could you do to be able to embrace these skills? I know there was all sorts of things that our team was looking at. How do we really take it up a notch or two in our virtual selling in order to be able to include a lot more interaction and engagement and improve our own game of training and selling? So commitment, the willingness to go out of your own comfort zone.
Lisa,
And
I have
there's
a
some
question for
interesting
you.
facets. Yep, what's that, Asad?
So I have a question for you. So let's say right now the economy is picking up in a lot of different spaces, which means there's demand for all sorts of different things. Buyers are buying a lot. And so a lot of sales professionals in a lot of industries are doing well. They're hitting their numbers, they're overachieving. But does that mean that they've actually mastered the new norm? Like, should they just say, okay, fine, like whatever I'm doing is working, I'm good at this? Do you think there's a level of commitment required beyond that? Because right now it might be the market that is leading to this outcome versus the person.
Yeah, and we're certainly seeing that in a number of industries, such as the building materials industry is a great example that is absolutely thriving. And commitment, Asad, is not just about commitment to achieve your sales numbers, it's commitment to get better at the mastery of sales. So what's fascinating is, and we are seeing so many companies who are doing extremely well, but what's happening is those salespeople will admit they are so crazy busy that actually they've stepped back a few notches in their sales capability, because in order to be able to keep up with the demand, they've slid back into being more order takers than truly being strategic, proactive, consultative sellers.
That's interesting.
And so here's where I'm going to encourage everyone, every leader, every salesperson who's on here today to go, if we take a look at that future of the B2B rep that we've just shared, which one of those skills could you improve? There's great competencies. So we work very closely with the sales evaluations of the Objective Management Group. And what these evaluations have been really, really helpful for so many sales leaders, because one, it's hard to be able to evaluate your sales team when you're not able to be on the road with them. So again, it looks at in three key buckets: will to sell. And as you said, the will to sell outweighs or trumps selling competencies any day and every day. And so here's an example where somebody's got the desire and passion, 98% they scored in their desire to be successful in sales, but their commitment is only 50%. This is a salesperson who is serviceable. However, as we can see, his will to sell is much, much lower than his DNA and his selling percentile. So we really do need to be able to take a look at and help the salesperson to really understand what's it going to take to be back on their game, right? And what can they get excited about? They're going, yeah, okay, I need to embrace this virtual selling, but I'm not excited about it. So again, helping them to understand what are their goals. Where do they want to be 3 years from now? How do they want to actually be curious to understand their client's business and be able to solve all the new challenges that this new economy is being faced with. So again, those are things that we can take a look at that. And we're also seeing a very, very high percentage of salespeople choosing to retire because they're like, you know what? I've worked 30 years, 40 years. It's time to hang this up, which will give a great opportunity for all those new young business grads or people who are looking for a different career option to consider sales. So certainly that's part of the wheel. So let's take a look at some of then the other skills. One of the biggest things is that human connection, and this is the biggest disconnect we saw. And it's been fascinating. I know last year when this pandemic started, we created these give, get, gain sessions to be able to bring leaders and sales professionals together. Last year was a tough year. I know, Asad, for your business and my business. However, both of us have been able to help our teams turn this around, build trust virtually. We have secured more new customers in the past 16 months than in the past 5 years. And I can't wait to actually meet some of these people in person. But you can build trust virtually. And part of that is just turning on that camera and being able to do that. And as we're seeing in the stats, many buyers are saying it's as effective or even more effective than being able to be face-to-face. So relationship selling has to be taken to a whole new level.
If you think about what goes into building a relationship with somebody, there's a level of connection based on the fact that I think you're an expert. You have had the curiosity and intelligence and experience to develop a real expertise. And so we're having a doctor-patient interaction. I think there's one fundamental over there. The other is you connect on some deeper level, right? And so that's what people used to use those lunches and dinners for, right? Like, let's talk about our families and our hobbies and our interests and things like that. And sure, a dinner could help with that, but it's a big commitment of time and effort. When you have a virtual call with somebody and they're working from their house, right? Like, how many times have we been on a call with somebody and their dog came into the room, the kid came at the back, their partner walked by, you see what their house is set up like, you're like, hey, that's a nice paint, they're in their backyard, and you're understanding a little bit more about that person. Like everything from like the way the paintings are in the thing to like how they've set their rooms up, and the off-the-cuff things that are happening, like dogs in the room or a parent or a child walking by. These allow you to create that connection. These are opportunities to stress on. And so I feel like in some cases we've gotten to know people at a much deeper level than we could ever get to know them before. We also know that in the pandemic, everybody did personally go through some type of mental stress with all of this, right? Like, you're cooped up in the house, it sucks, you don't have the rituals available to you that would help you relieve your stress. And so you would talk about it a little bit more. There's so many client calls in which I went on and they're like, man, I'm feeling it like today, like I'm ready for the world to open up. And then you would have this random conversation with a person, but it would be about a real core feeling versus the posturing that sometimes used to happen on those dinners where everybody's been a little bit fake with each other. So I think this is a real opportunity to get to know people and build deep relationships. I do not think the only way to build a deep relationship is with somebody when you are actually in the same room as them. We just need to know how to do it a little bit differently.
Absolutely. And Asad, we always host our Evolve Sales Leaders event every year. And I was quite concerned about not being able to host this event live when we had to postpone it. And then I just looked at it and said, oh my goodness, I have a glorious opportunity. I get to invite everybody to my home this year. And that's exactly how we kick things off, right? And being able to do that. So this is also the opportunity, as you've already said, to leverage that technology. So if there's anybody here who's trying to actually approach you, you've already given them the golden keys to let them know that if they're trying to sell to you, providing a personalized video just to you, Asad, would certainly be able to open up your virtual door. And
I will always respond.
Many people be able to do that. And again, being able to personalize it, customize it. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? It just needs to be conversational. So leveraging that technology, and you also talked about adopting that CRM and using data and technology. I mean, we have been looking at, and so many sales teams looking at their data, their stats, in order to be able to make faster, more efficient decisions. So again, there's so much technology that many of us were using, but we're always actively deploying it. So I think this is the opportunity to be able to leverage that technology and get good at it. The next key skill is simply having a more purposeful conversation. And many people are hesitant, and as you talked about, fumble and bumble on these virtual calls, and simply just having a framework. They're used to being able to rely on their personality style or their rapport, their relationship in a face-to-face meeting. But certainly the purpose conversation provides a framework and really has been embraced. And so many people have actually said, oh my goodness, I can put my cheat sheet right beside here or make my notes and the client doesn't know it. So again, this is a great framework to be able to give the tools to your team. It's common sense. How do you prepare? Understand the personality styles of the decision makers, build rapport, purpose of the meeting, ask questions, be curious, summarize, and execute the next steps. And we've got a great template that if you wanted to actually download this from our website at teneoresults.com, happy to be able to share this. This is a great tool that enables your salespeople to have a much, much more effective conversation face-to-face and definitely virtually.
This is amazing. This is an amazing sheet. It covers so many important points. I think it's such a key point that I hope people really like take this away. If there's one thing that you take away from this, is probably this point that you can be prepared in a way that you've never been able to be prepared before. I'll give you a personal example. We have a company-wide huddle twice a week now, Mondays and Thursdays. I run one of them, our Chief Customer Officer runs the other one. These are half-an-hour sessions for the whole company. And this is where we share what's going on in the organization, everything from revenue and projects to strategic initiatives, new things launched, and then wins across the company. To have done that in person, I would have had to memorize a lot, right? And I would have maybe had a little bit of a paper there, but then that feels a little bit choppy. And so the preparation required to run an effective meeting would have been a lot longer. And then maybe I would have had to think, okay, is it worth it? Or do we change the cadence? What do we do? Well, right now, my notes are on the screen. I can prepare for it in 20 minutes. And my notes are there. I can record notes very easily. My computer's there. Remember we all used to say that if you take a computer to a client meeting and you open it up, you're creating a barrier between you and the client. Well, that's not there anymore, right? You can literally type while talking. You have your notes there. This is such an opportunity to not have to rely on memory and be able to leverage tools that instigate thoughts and moves in a way that we've never been able to do before. But we got to use it, and these are the opportunities.
Yeah, in our Road Warriors to Tech Titans program, they actually share some of the key tools that they get and how they transition from being that Road Warrior to Tech Titan. And actually one of the salespeople did a great job. He actually showed all his props that he had all around his laptop and his desk in order to be able to help him be more confident, more prepared. And he could see all of it, but the client could. So it's cool. So here's one of the skills that I think is the biggest game changer. One of the things that we noticed is a lot of salespeople would go and meet face-to-face with a customer, gather all the information, and then say, yep, I'm excited about that, and I'm going to provide you with a proposal, and they email it off to them. And here is the difference. You can now gather all that information, work with your team to effectively put together a solution that will solve their problem. And rather than emailing it, you can set up a virtual call and go through the proposal.
Yeah.
What's cool is you can use all these great tools, such as, you can annotate, you could do video, polls, product demos, all sorts of different ways to be able to demonstrate virtually. It was interesting. One of our clients actually shared that he had a client that was really, really interested, but also looking at their competitor's product. And so what they were able to do was to be able to go back and demonstrate virtually how the robotic solution would improve their operation. It took, he said, grit to be able to pull this all together, but they wowed the client. So again, this is, I think, part of the game changer that people didn't have the ability to do. The other thing is you can now have more people on those calls. We all know there's at least, 2, 4, 6 decision makers. You can have them all in the same place. You can watch their body language, have them ask questions. This is the way that you can shorten the sales cycle and really wow them and be able to earn that business effectively and efficiently.
I think just to add something to that, so in this world, think of your sellers as mixed martial artists. Like they need to be able to leverage different ways of selling based on the moment that they're in and what is required in that moment. So traditionally, companies would train their salespeople on Sandler, on another methodology. And essentially, you'd have teams that have said, we are consultative salespeople, we are solutions oriented, we're challengers, we do provocative selling. Actually, a really good salesperson knows how to do what based on the situation at hand. So an example is, if you're, like what Lisa said, that if you're at the part in the sales process where they're picking between you and a different vendor, and you have a feature that is going to give you a competitive advantage, then it's time not to be provocative and time to focus on solution selling, right? Focus on that particular solution. If you're dealing with a client that's going to be a little bit more old school and resistant to your particular thing that you're selling, well, that's where provocative selling is going to work. Now, what companies what companies feel is that it's too much to train a person to know everything. It's actually your job as a leader to know in which instances what a person needs to do. So you're not teaching them the whole methodology end to end. You're teaching them bits and pieces of it for the different moments, and teaching them how to pull and what indicators to look for to figure out which style to deploy.
Yeah. So, Asad, let's actually go back to the polls. And Ruplin, if we could launch our second poll, let's find out from our participants today, what skill do you feel is most important for sales professionals to master to be successful in the new way of selling?
So our options today are commitment to change, leveraging technology, building trust and rapport virtually, consultative selling in a virtual setting, and presenting solutions virtually.
And Ruplin, can they only choose one? Or can they choose multiple?
Yes, that's right. We've got one choice.
Yeah. The one that you feel it will be the one that will make the biggest impact for you and your teams. I'm curious to see what this one's going to be.
It's playing out the right way. Like, I think building trust and rapport is number one right now. Commitment to change is number two.
All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and share the results. So we had 36% vote building trust and rapport virtually, 30% say commitment to change, 21% say leveraging technology, and 12% saying consultative selling in a virtual setting. No one voted for presenting solutions virtually.
Okay, but the biggest one is 36% trust, and then 30% commitment. Interesting. Yes, sales is all about trust. Yet, I think that's the other thing is building that trust, knowing when to ask the right questions, knowing when to ask the business, so that you're not selling too soon. So we've got a few more things that we want to be able to cover, Asad. Asad, how can sales leaders transition their team to build that trust, get that commitment? What do you think? What could sales leaders do?
I think it's an interesting question. It's multifaceted, but the first thing that would come to mind is that sales leaders need to do a better job at telling people why they need to adopt this. And that actually starts with a bit of a macro analysis, right? Like, what are the worldwide trends that are going to play out and why we need to actually do this because of what things are playing out in a macro sense, right? So that's step one, is for you to gain commitment from people. They are smart, and if you tell them the why, and especially if you contextualize it as a long-term trend, like, hey, this is what's happening right now. Could we be fine for the next year if we don't do this? Sure. Where will you be in 5 years where this is the only way things are being done because of A, B, and C reasons? If the logic connects with the salesperson will commit to changing a habit that was entrenched with a lot of positive reinforcement and develop a new habit that's going to be uncomfortable early on, but then they'll develop comfort over time. For that, you need to start with the why. I think the second thing they've got to do is they've got to really help these people understand it from another angle, which is the customers. Like, we are all debating whether this is the right way or not, right? Like, will it go here, will it not? We've got customers. Just run a survey of your own customers. Ask them what they want. Like, if you go to your salespeople and 90% of your customers said, yeah, we're quite all right with buying virtually. We'd like to do a half-year review in person, and that's it. Well, now you have the proof required to get your team to transition, like get them to believe that the transition is important. The rest of it becomes tactical, right? Like, how do we train them? What tools do we give them? Like, there's a lot over there that we can discuss, but the first is the commitment side. How do you get them committed? I think it starts with a macro analysis, and then it starts with an analysis of your own client base.
Yeah, there's another way that can also help transition. And so we're seeing this emerging role in sales, but we're also seeing a new emerging role in sales leadership. And this is what we're calling, Jonathan Farrington from the UK actually shared at our Evolve event, the deputy sales coach. Just like you need to build the bench strength of your sales team, you also need to be able to build the succession plan and the bench strength of your sales leadership team. So having this sales coach will help to actually improve the bench strength, create a designated resource, and provide confidence through coaching, because this takes work. Sales leaders are stretched way too thin. I know many of you who are on today's call, I don't have time to do one more thing. So this is a way to be able to do that. And again, using technology, there's some really great technology tools that enable you to observe and listen to a salesperson's role play or actual customer call, and you can actually then see how effective they're being with talk time, number of questions, and are they really asking curious questions and solving solutions and problems. So great ways to look at that. Well, we are getting closer to the top of the hour, so if anybody has questions, please put them into the questions box. Asad, I want to actually wrap things up here. And when you and I were having our conversation this week, we talked about improving effectiveness and the economy. Because one of the things is, it has been incredible that this pandemic has allowed many organizations to thrive, for salespeople to be more effective and have some of their best years. So what do you feel are some of the recommendations that you have that a team could be more effective in order to generate revenue?
I think it plays into a lot of the things we discussed right now. I think if we were to pick the one big one, right, it is really trying to be the level of seller that your buyer wants, right? Doing things in a progressive manner, because here's your opportunity. This is the reality. Not everyone can adjust. They can't, right? How often in sports do you see a player from one team go to the other and they couldn't adjust to the new style of playing, right? And so they crash and burn and they have to go back to the old team or to a team that plays like that. So it's going to be a percent of people that make this adjustment. Buyers always respond well to the most finessed seller, the one that has all of their stuff together. The one that doesn't come across as they need the sale, the one that has the expertise, the one that is driving a process that is showing you how you get to the outcome and giving you confidence that the probability of getting to the outcome is really high. So I think that's the first thing we've got to understand is, like, let's be the best versions of sellers right now, because that's a real opportunity. I think when you play that out a little bit, as sales managers, you've got to rethink a few things. You've got to rethink roles and responsibilities here. I don't think it's effective to give a person a hunting and a farming myths job right now. Like, well, those are really two fundamentally different skill sets. personally, I think the person that you hire in 100% new business in a business development role is different to the person that you hire in an account management role. All the time we hear leaders complain that either the person is not good enough at the account management portion of their job, or they're not doing enough new business development. It's because you've overcomplicated it. Like you've not made it clear and you've not simplified it. We need to simplify sales. We need to break it down and say, we have the need for new business. Let's hire people who have the characteristics, competencies, and experiences required to be the best new business developers in the world. We need really good account managers. They need to be obsessed with successful outcomes for their customers. And so we need people that have that skill set. And I also think that if you think of it like this, you do a few things. Firstly, change titles. These titles are horrible. Inside sales, outside sales makes no sense. Right? Like let's give titles that are descriptive of the role and helpful to the professional in the job they're doing. So if I'm an account manager, like let's say you're a buyer and an account manager reaches out to you versus a customer success professional reaches out to you, who are you more excited to talk to, right? If an inside sales professional reaches out to you or business development manager reaches out to you, who do you want to talk to more, right? So let's rethink these. And and we know that right now in a virtual world, coaching is much harder. People's strategy is a little bit trickier. Put people together. Like let's make people work in pods. So there's a lead generator, a hunter, and an account manager working together strategically to have a successful outcome together. They're going to feel more connected to each other. It's going to be better for your client, and it's going to be easier for your managers.
So those pods are really fascinating. And you're right, with people working remotely, they're missing that working together as a team. And I like this concept of a pod. You also talked a little bit about like, at one point in time, inside sales would have to do some other research. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that lead generation analyst and what their role could be to help find that research and information?
Certainly. In the past, people used to think that new business development, the lead generation component of it, requires experience and expertise and all of these things, right? So we need to get people that have more experience to do it. Somebody who's at the earlier part of their career wouldn't be able to figure it out. I disagree with that point of view, but I think you've got to solve for the problem, but there's a solution here. So you hire high potential sales, like junior sales reps, to do the heavy lifting of the lead gen. But you put them in this pod where there's a more senior business developer there as well. And so this person is doing research on the more enterprisey type of accounts, the larger accounts. They're doing the research work. They're figuring out what business initiatives are happening over there that we need to tie into as we approach them. Who are the people that we need to approach? And the senior person might do the reach out on the smaller accounts. This person might actually do the heavy lifting of setting up the meetings. But when they work together, you have the senior person telling them how to do things and supporting them strategically and coaching them, because their money is dependent on this person doing their job really well. This person is getting the training and development they need, and this works really well.
Okay. Excellent, excellent. This is great looking at this. And again, I think this is the opportunity to really, really think differently. So anyway, we're going to start to wrap things up because we're at the top of the hour. And again, there's lots of different things that you can be doing to be looking at how to actually stimulate the economy. Certainly there are different programs either for sales professionals or sales leaders that are accredited by CPSA, and that we'd be happy to have the opportunity to work with you to be able to do that. Our Road Warriors to Tech Titans training program has been an incredible success during the past year, and people are getting stronger, better at being able to master those skills. CPSA also has all sorts of great offerings, portal memberships. Rupalin, is there anything else that you want to be able to share from CPSA's perspective on how CPSA can actually help the sales community and sales teams master these skills?
That's perfect. Thanks, Lisa. Lisa's very right. We have so many virtual events coming up this summer and this fall. If you'd like to go ahead and register or view any of our virtual events, they are at cpsa.com/events, and you'll see everything listed there for registration. And we can move on to Q&A if you'd like now, Lisa.
Yeah, do we have any questions in the Q&A, Rupalin?
We sure do. And just a reminder, the questions function is located in your dashboard. So you'll see it on the right-hand side of your screen there. Please feel free to enter any questions that you have about today's content. We have a great question here, Lisa and Asad. We have, if your customer doesn't have their camera turned on, do you keep your camera on?
Absolutely, because it's, and here's the thing, I will always ask, hey, can you turn on your camera? And some people say, oh, can you do that? Most times, so 99% of the times when I ask that, people say, oh, I'm sorry, I thought I had my camera on. Or they'll realize, and that's just an expectation that you can be able to set even when you send the calendar invite. I always ask or encourage people to turn their cameras on because it allows you to be able to build that trust and rapport. Asad, is there anything else you want to be able to add to that?
You can always ask them while setting up the meeting, like, I can send you a meeting link for a video call, or do you want to have an old school phone conversation? And they can pick, right? Like, so you've described that, hey, if you're doing this virtually on like a Zoom, GoToMeeting, etc., it's a video call, right? So you've kind of given them the option to choose, and it tells you a little bit about that person, right? When they pick one versus the other, and you're going in prepared then to do a really good video call or to do a really good phone call. So you need to know which one it's going to be, and this is a nice way to figure that out.
Yeah, great. Rupalin, do we have time for one more question? People are still staying on. This is great. We've got people right on to the end here.
Sure do. And I have had a couple of attendees today ask about today's presentation, whether or not it has been recorded. Yes, it has been recorded, and a link to the video will be sent out after the session once it's finished processing. Thank you for asking that. But our next question here is, if most calls are on the cell phone, do you have a program to recommend to have the manager jump on the call in order to coach?
So you can, so for example, there's a tool that we've been using, a Refract video coaching tool, and it'll record either a telephone conversation, a Zoom call. It will do either of those. You could also do a three-way call so you can listen to it. But what's nice about the video coaching tool is you don't have to be actually on the live call. You can go back and listen to it. The other thing that you can do is you can tag different parts and say, this was a great way for you to be able to ask a question. Ooh, I like the way that you paused and reflected here and allowed the customer to answer. So what's nice about some of the video coaching tools, it not only allows you to observe, but it allows it to truly be a coaching tool to be able to provide feedback to your team members.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think there's a role for these in-person coaching sessions, right? Like we used to call them ride-alongs, or being there and observing a person on a call or on a phone call or video call. But we have to understand that the person is either going to do the best performance ever, or they'll be nervous on those calls. Like that's just the reality, right? You're the boss.
So you shared about that. Your best calls were not when your boss was with you.
When the founder of the company we used to go to meetings together, I just, for some reason, my best foot forward, I couldn't put it. I was never horrible, but like it wasn't me at my best. And when he wasn't there, I was at my best. I was killing it. And I would have hoped for him to have gotten to see that. He's nice. He believed in me, and he probably knew that was how it was playing out. But this happens. And so what we need to take away from that is that we're not getting the truest sense of how this person performs in these meetings. Hence, we're not identifying the best coaching strategy for that person. By having a call recording software or video recording software, and there's so many of them out there that are really, really good, you're able to truly listen in on how this person is doing most of the time, not when they're extra prepared or not when they're nervous.
Absolutely. Excellent. Well, Asad, Rupalin, we are a few minutes over our time. It's been great to be able to gather so many leaders, salespeople today. Asad, thank you very, very much. Your expertise in working with so many different sales teams is always appreciated. I always enjoy all of our conversations, and I welcome any of our attendees today to reach out to you if there is any expertise that you can provide. Rupalin, thank you. It's always a pleasure to work in partnership with CPSA, and you always do such a great job moderating this. So Thanks, everybody. We have thoroughly enjoyed today's conversation. And if you do have any questions, by all means, please reach out to us. And Rupelin, there will be a survey that will be going out immediately following this webinar for any other questions that they may have.
Sure thing.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Happy
Thank you,
Friday.
Lisa.
And
Thank you,
go out
Rupelin.
there and let's go make sales happen and turn the profession of sales into a very proud career. Thanks, everybody.
Good luck, everyone.
Bye, everyone.